A very good morning to all the students of class 11th political science and students. As you know, we were doing the first chapter of your book, that is Constitution at Work, and we were into the first chapter, and the name of the chapter is Constitution Why and How. So we had already started that chapter and we have finished three parts, and today we are going to take the fourth part of this chapter. So in these three parts, let me quickly revise what we have done. So first part was regarding the introduction of the book and the content and the new revised syllabus, but we had also discussed some of the functions. Okay, so in the last two videos I had talked about the important functions of the constitution. In total there were 5 functions which we have discussed in detail. Okay, and then in the last video we had talked about making of the constitution also, that is we talked about the composition of the constituent assembly and how its representatives were elected, the complete process of cabinet mission or the cabinet plan according to which the constituent assembly was designed. We had studied and we had discussed all those steps and procedures. But today we will be taking a new topic, that is fundamental rights. So as I told you, all the fundamental rights is in the chapter 2 of your NCERT book, but according to the new revised syllabus I have told you chapter number 2 and chapter number 1 has been merged, so we will be studying this topic under chapter 1 only. So the topic for the day under this part 4 is fundamental right, which is from the chapter rights in the Indian Constitution, but now it's chapter number 1. So let's study something important about fundamental rights. Although you know some basic concepts about fundamental rights, you know there are 6 fundamental rights, and in the junior classes you just has been writing what are the fundamental rights. But now here in class 11th, as a student of political science, we need to understand the roots of these rights. So we'll try to understand them properly and what is the significance and relevance of these fundamental rights for each and every citizen. Okay, so this introduction is a bit important. So let's start from this introduction part only. A constitution is not only about the composition of various organs of the government and the relations among them. So they have written constitution is not only about the composition and the powers and the relation between the various organs of the government like legislature, judiciary or executive, or institutions like Supreme Court or High Court. Constitution is not only about explaining the powers and various provisions and articles relating to these organs, but apart than this, one important functions of constitution is that it is trying to protect the citizens of our country from the we can say exploitation of the government or any individual or any organization. So every citizen is being protected by the constitution by giving or by providing a certain set of rights, and those certain set of rights are called fundamental rights. And through those fundamental rights, every citizen or every individual is being protected by the dominance or by the overpower of the government, as government has lot of power but government cannot misuse its powers because citizens has been protected through government by providing the certain fundamental rights. So in this chapter we'll try to understand what are those fundamental rights and why they are empowering the citizens. But also you have to remember there are some limitations on our fundamental rights. If I talk about fundamental right to freedom, freedom doesn't mean I can do anything. I should not harm the freedom of other people. So there are always constraints and limitations while enjoying my own rights. While enjoying my own rights, which has been given to me by the this constitution, I should not disturb or I should not violate the rights of the other people. So that is why there are some constraints and limitations or barriers when we talk about the fundamental rights. Although fundamental rights are always strengthening the citizens of India and from the we can say dominance of the power of the government. Now moving forward, as we studied in the last chapter, we have studied in the last chapter, here means in the last topic we had studied the functions also. In those functions we talked about how government's powers are checked and some limitations are put on the government's power by giving certain fundamental rights to the citizens. Same thing has been mentioned here. Constitution is a document that sets limits on the powers of the government, because government is very powerful but still constitution has put some limitations on the power of the government. This we had studied in the functions of the this constitution. and ensures democratic system in which all persons enjoy the certain right. Okay, some there are some limitations put on the government, and in a democratic system like in India, all people, all the citizens enjoy certain rights, and these certain rights we call them as fundamental rights contained in the Indian constitution. So in Indian constitution we will find a chapter that is fundamental rights. So you have to remember, in a constitution there, like in a book we have 10 chapters, same in the constitution is a written document, and in this written document there are 22 chapters. You have to remember that. And if we talk about the fundamental rights, these fundamental rights you will find in the third chapter of the constitution. That is why it's written, the part 3 of the constitution of India lists the fundamental rights. So of the list of these fundamental right is mentioned in the third part of the constitution. It's like a chapter. Also, this same chapter, this is the third chapter, also mentions the limit on these rights, and it is also important to have some limits on the rights of the citizens. Like I gave you the example of right to freedom, it does not mean we will murder someone. Okay, so there has to be some limits. We cannot say that okay, I have a freedom so I can do whatever I want, I can murder anyone, I can slap anyone. No, we are having some limits, okay, through laws. In the past 50 years the scope of right has changed. Now if we talk about the last 50 years, the scope of these rights has changed and in some respect expanded. Now this scope has expanded. So previously we just used to talk about right to equality, right to freedom, but now within these rights you will find cluster of rights, many rights. We will study in this chapter in detail further. So now their scope has increased with the passage of time, with change in the situations, with so coping with the time we had made various changes in the rights also. So that is why its scope has changed in from the last 50 years. After studying this chapter, after studying the topic on fundamental rights and duties and directive principles of state policies, you will be able to understand what are various fundamental rights listed in the Constitution of India, how these rights are protected, how these are protected, what is the role of judiciary that has played in how judiciary is protecting our rights, and what is the difference between fundamental rights and directive. At first we'll cover this topic, fundamental rights and duties, then we will cover the topic that is directive principles of the state policy, and after understanding them individually we'll try to find a relationship between these two concepts properly. Okay, so after the introduction, the first topic which we are trying to cover is the importance of the rights. So before we try and understand what are those important fundamental rights which has been listed down in the constitution for protecting the citizens from the government or from any individual so that our rights cannot be exploited. So to understand, before we understand that, let's see the importance of rights. What is the importance of rights in our life? Why we require such fundamental rights or basic set of rights? What is the requirement? Okay, so for that understanding the importance of the rights, we'll take the two examples from your NCERT book. These are some of the two important examples and we'll try to understand this quickly. So it's written here. So these two examples we are taking in just to understand what is the importance of right in our life. So we sometimes we realize the things when we go through certain incidents. So these are the two incidents. After that we'll try we will realize yes, rights are really important, and then we'll discuss about the fundamental rights. Okay, in 1982, this year, during the construction of the World Asian Games. So at this year, 1982, there we had conducted Asian Games in India, Delhi, in 1982. You have to remember that. So in this, there was a construction work for Asian Games, in the government engaged in a few contractors, with a few contractors. As you know, whenever there are Asian Games or Commonwealth Games or any like we have IPLs also. So before this events take place, there are a lot of things which has to be done in our country, improving the infrastructure, roads, okay, water, electricity, stadiums, grounds, hotels. Okay, so there are a lot of things and facilities which are to be given to the players which are arriving from the other countries. As in this Asian Games there were around 33 countries which were going to participate in India in these Asian Games in 1982. So there was, before the starting of these games, there was a construction work going on relating to these Asian Games, and few of the important contractors were engaged in this, government contractors. And these contractors employed a large number of very poor construction workers from different parts of the country to build the flyovers and stadium. As a construction work was going on, roads, flyovers, stadiums, so there was a lot of construction work going on. So this contractor has hired lot of laborers, we can say, from the various different parts of the country, and these workers were kept in poor working conditions. So if you will see, their working conditions were very poor. Even they were paid very less, minimum wages, whatever are the minimum wages which are set by the government, even that wage was not given to these workers because they were very poor and they were having some problems, so they had to work anyhow. So in these poor conditions also and on the very low wages, they were working under these contractors before the Asian Games. But a team of social scientists, there is a team of social scientists, social activists who work for the society. Okay, so these people studied their poor conditions of the in the petitions. So they saw what was wrong and how in the poor conditions these laborers were working on the very low wages which were set by the government. So these social activists or we can say, or the scientists, they petitioned, they filed a complaint in the Supreme Court regarding this incident, and they argued that employing a person to work for less than the minimum prescribed wage amount of beggar or forced labor, if they have employed many workers and they are not paying them minimum wages which has been set by the government, it means they are promoting forced labor, which is a crime, which is a violation of the fundamental rights. It means they were violating the fundamental rights of others, of these workers, fundamental right against exploitation. It means they were exploiting them. These workers were working for them for the growth and development of our country, for in the construction work, but they were not being paid the minimum wages even. So this was a exploitation of the fundamental right against exploitation, and this was filed, complaint was filed by the social scientists in the Supreme Court. So the court accepted this plea and directed the government. So court had accepted this complaint, and they directed the government contractors and the government to ensure that thousands of workers get the prescribed wages, that every worker should get the prescribed wages which has been decided by the government. If they are paying them less, it will be a violation of the fundamental right against exploitation of the workers. So we can see how the importance of right, what is the importance of right, because if this fundamental right would have not been there, so they would have not got justice. On what basis these social scientists would have filed a complaint in the Supreme Court? Because they had this fundamental right against exploitation, so they were able to file a complaints against those contractors who were paying less wages to these poor workers. So this is the importance of the rights which has been listed down in the Constitution. So this was the one example. Other example is a bit different from this. So in this you saw fundamental right against exploitation came into action. Now let's see in the other case. Machal Lalung was 23. This was a man. He was a 23 boy, we can say, when he was arrested. When he was arrested, he was just 23 years old. And why he was arrested? Okay, he was a resident of Chubri village of Moregaon district of Assam. So he belonged to Assam. Okay, and what was the charge on him? Machal was charged of causing grievous injuries. He must have attacked someone, and or he must have tried to kill someone. So on that charge he was arrested. He was just 23 years of age at that time. So he was found mentally unstable. So when he was arrested, and he would have come for trial, and there would have been a case registered for him. So at that time he was found mentally too unstable to stand trial. So he was found that mentally he was not fit, and as he was not mentally fit, so his trial could not take place. And so Lokpriya Gopinath Bardolori mental hospital in Tejpur. So he was sent to this mental hospital in Tejpur for treatment. So he was sent that, okay, before we start his case and we see what are the things which went wrong, before that he needs the treatment. So he was sent to this mental hospital for treatment. So Machal was treated successfully, and doctors wrote twice to jail, but then he was treated properly by 1967. And the doctors had informed the jail authorities or the police in 1967, but no action was taken. Then again the hospital again informed the police that in 1996. You can see how long these years are. So again in 1996 the government this hospital doctors, they informed the police that this person Machal was perfectly fine now and fit to stand trial. Now his case can be heard in the court. But no one paid any attention. And he kept on staying in the judicial custody. Machal Lung remained in the judicial custody. Now Machal Lung was released. Finally he was released in July 2005. At that time he was 77. Now can you see, when he was arrested he was just 23 years old, and when he was released from the jail in 2005, he had been 77 years old then. He spent 54 years under the custody, during which his case never came up. 54 years he stayed in the custody, and his case never came up for hearing. He did not come up for hearing. So here we can see the negligence of the rights. Although we have the fundamental rights, but those were not implemented properly. We can see here he was freed from a team appointed. He was freed because a team appointed by National Human Rights Commission. There was a team of National Human Rights Commission. They intervened after an inspection of under trials in the state. As there was a team of National Human Rights Commission, they had intervened and they saw his case that from 1967 and 1996 the doctor has said he's fit, but his case was had still not come up for hearing. So they had helped him, and now he was finally released when he was 77 years old. So what do we understand by this? His right to life and liberty has been, we can say, exploited or violated here. So Machan's entire life, so because of the negligence of the government, we can say, or the improper implementation of the rights, Machan's entire life was wasted. Okay, he was 23, and when he was left from the jail he was 77. So his entire life was wasted because a proper trial against him could not take place, because proper trial could not take against him never took place. Our constitution gives every citizen right to life and liberty. So here we are talking, our constitution gives every citizen a right to life and liberty. This means that every citizen must have the right to fair speedy trial. It means if, and every citizen should have a fair and speedy trial. If he has uh, committed a crime, or he has offended any laws, or he has violated any laws, he should be given a fair and speedy trial in front of the court. Okay, he will be punished, a proper procedure will be followed. But in the case of Machal, it was ignored, and he was in the mental hospital, and later the doctors informed that he was fine, but still his case was not taken up for hearing in the court, and he was 77. It means his entire life was wasted. So Machal's case shows that what happens when rights guaranteed by the constitution are not available in practice. So in this, from the second example, we can understand if the rights which are already existing in the constitution but they are not in practice, or they are not implemented in practice properly, this can be the case where he had to spend his whole life in the jail. He was 77 now. Okay, so also you have to remember the proper implementation of these rights is important. So here we are trying to understand what are the importance of right, why rights are so important, and why it is so important that these rights should be in the right place and in a right way and in a right procedure should be implemented in the society by the various institutions. Next topic within this topic of fundamental rights, before we understand that, it is also important that bill of rights. What do we understand by bill of rights? So both these examples which we have studied shows the importance of having rights. So after studying those two examples, we can see how important it is to have rights, and also the proper implementation of right and the actual implementation of these rights. Only having the written rights are not going to work. It is important that are these rights properly working, are they in practice, are the institutions taking the right actions against those rights. So it is important here. So from those examples we can understand, if I say I have right to freedom, I have right to equality, but if they are not in practice, they are not being implemented properly, what is the use of being having those rights? So it is important that we should have rights, and also it is equally important that those rights should be implemented and should be in practice properly. A democracy must ensure that individual has certain rights that the government will always recognize. So it is important in a democratic country like in India that every individual should have some rights, so that we can protect the individuals from the government, or from the powers of the government. As government has lot of powers, so there has been limitations put on the government also by the constitution in the form of fundamental rights which has been given to the individuals will always be recognized in the rights. Therefore, it is often a practice in most democratic countries to list the rights of the citizens in a constitution. So mostly in most of the democratic countries, you'll find that rights are listed in the constitution itself. Same like in India, as in chapter 3 of the constitution, or the part 3 of the constitution I told you, we are having our list of fundamental rights, and those articles come from 12 to 35. If you see and study about the articles starting from 12 to 35, these are the articles which talk about our fundamental rights. Such a list of rights mentions and protect the constitution is called the Bill of Rights. Such a list of rights mentioned and protected by the constitution is called the Bill of Rights. So what do you understand by a Bill of Rights? Bill of Rights are the list of those rights which are mentioned in the constitution, and also those rights are protected also by the constitution by following the various processes and by having the various institutions in place. So that is called Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights prohibits government from thus acting against the rights of the individuals, and this Bill of Rights will always stop and protect individuals from the government if government is acting against the rights of the individuals, and ensures a remedy in case there is a violation of the rights. And in case there is a violation of the rights, there will be a remedy, that what can be done, how a citizen can be protected if his rights are being violated. Okay, and in this, Supreme Court comes into action, or the judiciary is an important protector of our fundamental rights. From whom does the constitution protect the rights of the individuals? Okay, the rights of the person may be threatened by the, so who can threaten or who can challenge our rights? It can be a particular person can challenge our personal rights, private organization, or our government. In such a situation, the individual would need the protection of the government. So in this situation, always we will need the protection of the government. So it is necessary that government is bound to protect the rights of the individual. So it is also the responsibility of the government, instead of violating the rights of the individual, they have to protect the rights of the individuals. On the other hand, the organ of the government, the legislature, executive, bureaucracy, and judiciary, in the course of their functioning may violate the rights of the person. So with this, we talked about some of the important things before we study those important fundamental rights, because now you are not in class 9th or 8th that directly we will talk about those fundamental rights. So first of all, we need to understand that how these fundamental rights have come and why they are so important. So from the various examples, we have understood that, and we have also understood what do we understand by Bill of Rights and why it is important. So in the next lecture, I will exactly and from the beginning start our fundamental rights one by one. So I hope you have understood this base of the fundamental rights. Till then, you need to study this NCERT book and the content which I have taught you today. Thank you so much. Take care.